Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, discuss the art and science of running and the stuff that we put on our feet. Today at the roundtable, I have the founder of Doctors of Running, Dr. Matthew Klein, and myself. I'm Nathan Brown, and we are going to be going through a mailbag with questions from all of you as the main part of our episode today. But before we do that, we have to always thank Rabbit Running Apparel. They have been the presenting sponsor of this podcast this year and have just been coming out with some really great stuff for their summer collection. And they had their 10-year anniversary. I'm wearing the kind of oversized tee. It's one of my favorite shirts to wear right now. They've been doing a lot of great stuff. So if you are listening to this in July and you want 10% off, you can use the code SUMMERDOCS to get 10% off. And if you are in August, because this will release like a couple days before August will be AUGDOR 10, and that will get you 10% off your first order that month.
I want to give another shout out to we've talked about this like every single time on the last few podcasts, but the Sunrunner collection, the short sleeve, it's so good. I did like a hard long run in it this morning. It is great. Yes, it's you get what you pay for. It is so excellent. The zipper's great. The fit is fantastic. It is breathable. Even the plastic like hoodie, I don't know what material that is. It's really good. Dave was kind of complaining, oh, there's nowhere to put it. I'm like, put it on your head. Yeah. That's what it's there for. It's great. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. But my plug to Rabbit is, now that I'm back in working in the hospital, you all should make some like running scrubs, right? Like I already had these like nice like dress shirts. You should make running scrubs, because trying to get back into the scrub game is super confusing. Like I have scrubs that are like 15 years old that I've used. I probably shouldn't say this on air, but used in PT school and used throughout the craziness of working inpatient and during COVID, and still have them. I probably shouldn't.
Washing machine. It's what washing machines are for.
Yeah, washing machines and very powerful detergent is for.
Yes,
but yeah, trying to look for new ones and be like, I should probably get for some new ones. A, like, man, some of the cost, and B, like, yeah, you should just make some running scrubs. That would be fantastic.
That'd be fun. But you know what? If people know good scrubs for Matt, you should leave a comment so that he can find out where to get his scrubs. Best value scrubs. Drop them below. All right, but let's go into our for testing segment. This is where we talk about the different things that we're testing, from footwear to any other apparel stuff as well. I have a few that I'll run through relatively quickly, I think. One of the things came because we've had really bad air quality because of some fires in Minnesota and Canada, and all of the smoke is coming down here. And so I ran on my treadmill, and I cannot stand treadmill running. So what I usually do is I just like rotate shoes every like 5 to 10 minutes. So I just like try a bunch of shoes out. And there was a few that kind of stuck out that I kept on a little bit longer. One of them that was surprising was actually the Brooks Ghost Amp. And we've talked about this shoe before, but for like a very traditional classic daily trainer, it actually felt pretty smooth in comparison to other Brooks shoes that I've worn. I think the heel bevel is a little bit more well done than in the typical Ghost. And there's just a nice smooth transition from the heel up to the forefoot. There isn't too much responsiveness from this shoe, but it was able to get into some decent rhythm. It actually made me think of the Nova Blast 6 in terms of performance. I felt some similarities for me where it was almost a tale of two halves. The heel of this felt better. The heel of this, meaning of the amp, felt better. Yep. The forefoot of the Nova Blast felt significantly more responsive and better. But the fact that it kind of felt similar, I think, said something about the movement forward with the Ghost Amp versus the typical Ghost, and just what Brooks might be able to do with some daily training stuff. So that was fun to get some time in on that shoe.
I will say really quick, and I said this a couple times, the Brooks Ghost Amp is a major step forward in my opinion. I still think it is what the inline Ghost should be in my opinion. Interesting you say that in the Nova Blast. I agreed with you up until I think heels, the forefoot's good. It's just that heel transition to the Nova Blast is just
not as
awful.
Good. That's what I'm saying. The amp is better than the Nova Blast for heel transition.
Yep.
They just need to bevel it more on the like lateral side, I think, and then it would be fine.
I think so.
Because it's just wide based, and I don't know. The only thing though, Brooks, just get rid of the taper. And the fit will be way better. So that's another thing there.
Stop. I have to go up a half size in like every Brooks shoe. It's like slightly awkward because it's a half size large, but
yes.
But it's good. I'm glad you got to enjoy that shoe.
This is another shoe that I've worn around town on some walks. It's kind of I'll be honest, I think it looks terrible. But I do have something that I think is worth saying about it. So it's from Teva. Teva's starting to put together, they're under the same kind of parent company as Hoka. So I don't know how much those two companies will interact with each other in terms of materials. I have no idea. But this is the Teva Avon Trail Road 2, I think is what it's called. And it's a very firm EVA foam. It's nothing special underfoot, but they basically did an upper that has their Teva sandal-like construction. So the only reason I brought this out is I was actually spending a good amount of time with a friend of ours who has some pretty significant dexterity issues due to a stroke. And so I was thinking about people who have issues when it comes to dexterity and not being able to tie shoes. And if that's like the case for somebody, you could look at this for a walking shoe. I would not enjoy this for running, but for walking and maybe even some light hiking. And if you need kind of an option that's not, there's a lot of those kind of lacing options these days where you can replace shoes with more bungee-like things. But this is another option where the upper is a little bit like a booty construction and it's got this on top of it. So I've tried this out. I think it looks, I don't know, silly, but I am not a fashionista. So another shoe that I was able to run in because I've been inside on the treadmill because of the smoke and stuff. And like I've said, I hate running on the treadmill, so I rotate. And so this one, unfortunately, only lasted the short amount of time because it wasn't working for me, but it's the On Cloud Boom Strike 2. I thought I was going to potentially like this a little bit more, but what I was worried about was the later stage rocker. Every single later stage rocker trainer, that's like a stiff shoe, trainer or racing shoe, has not worked for me. I just can't get in rhythm. No matter how fast I go or slow, I just feel like I just kind of hit the brakes every time I'm trying to transition onto the forefoot. It's just the construction of my foot. Maybe my toes are a little bit longer, so my transition point is before the actual rocker. So I just couldn't get going on it. I think the fit is fantastic, really great in the forefoot, locks down good in the heel. So if you're looking for a spacious super shoe, I mean, you've got good fit. Price came down from last time, so you can't complain about that. That's pretty awesome by them to do that. So I hope that sticks.
Yeah, so my thoughts on this as well. Yeah, fit is great. Obviously lower volume with racing shoe, very breathable. I had the kind of, not exactly the same thing, but just found with the midsole is great. It definitely feels like it's a little bit softer than the last version. It's softer, obviously, for On. It's not the like crazy bounciest thing on the market, but it is definitely something that rolls along decently, but it's in a way where half marathon pace, great. Doing something longer in this, awesome. Trying to pick it up to like 5K pace, stuff like that, I really struggle with. And I found that I had to kind of compensate, but really, really trying to like exaggerate hip motion to actually get this shoe moving. So not kind of fitting my biomechanics unless I'm kind of running longer distances. The other challenge for me, and I'm curious to see how Andrea does with this, obviously you see the midfoot narrow a little bit. Heel midfoot, obviously not that stable because it's just a narrow platform. Forefoot is great. If you're someone that stays up on the forefoot, this is going to be great. There's plenty of width here, feels a lot more stable during the toe off. But I'm also super happy with the full length outsole on. Great job on this.
Yes.
But just a little bit of a different beast than the last version. Awesome. Like you said, it's down to $250, which is not cheap, but it's not $280.
Right.
Like the previous version. So I think that is definitely a little bit more sensible cost, especially with the contrasting. Isn't the LS version of this going to cost $280?
Probably.
Yeah, something like that.
I didn't see where it was going to be, but usually
I forgot where. Yeah, but yeah, so definitely more of a longer distance super shoe for sure, but still a contender in those longer efforts.
I have one more shoe that I got to try out that I am very excited about, but bummed because this one isn't going to work for me. But I'm gonna work in to get a different size, and that's the first edition of the SC Rebel. So it's funny. There was a Rebel version 3 fit like this one fits. See, I thought the version 3 of the Rebel was way too small. And it was super tight. Version 5 of the Rebel, normal Rebel, has a nice accommodating fit. Right. This silhouette mimics the version 3. So I'm like spilling out over the top from a length perspective. It's very it's tapered. So this is one I put on. I could get a little bit in, but it was just too tight and so snug on my foot. It's like, this is not worth it. But I am excited because we were talking about where the rocker sits. This is a much earlier stage rocker, which is really important because when you grab this shoe in your hands, it is pretty darn stiff with the plate that they have. And they also selected to take the plate and do it to a design that I thought was interesting. And I want to bounce this thought off of you, Matt, in a second. Yep. But what they did is, it's a little bit closer to the foot and the heel, but then it comes all the way just under the outsole. So there's rubber outsole and you can see the plate through it. They did like a translucent outsole. And I found that interesting. I know that this is sitting in a trainer category. This is not meant to be a racing shoe, but there was they did a study on the difference from a running economy perspective on if you put the plate closer to the foot versus further away from the foot. And it was that closer to the foot plate that, if I'm remembering right from that study, had better running economy than further away. So I'm thinking that their goal, I don't know what their heart and design is, their intentions, I guess, of their design. My thought is probably stability, creating a rockered profile that they want people to operate off of more than improving running economy to the most extent, because again, they're trying to create a kind of performance training shoe, not necessarily a race day shoe that's going to compete with the best racing shoes out there. But you've gotten more miles in it than I have. I'm hoping to go and get a half size up so that I can get some more miles, because if the fit is changed for me, it would be interesting to try it out, but very stiff.
Yep, absolutely. I've got about 30 miles in my pair, and the design, I've been super excited for this shoe. The fit is very close. I think it's going to be challenging that you're going to have to kind of figure out sizing for you. Luckily, this did work for me in terms of true to size, but it is more of a racer fit. And Nathan and David in the chat before this were like, David was like, yeah, this is a training shoe. I'm like, this shoe is super light and plated and has all the components of a super shoe. I feel like this is an evolution of taking the Rebel, the SC Trainer, and the SC Elite version 5 and combining it into one shoe, where it's like more of that it's this, I don't want to use the phrase super trainer, but it's got the components. It easily can race. It does long distance stuff really well. I've done a long run in this shoe where it really performed well. Trying to do track work, it's possible. It doesn't transition that as quick as I would want, but it's been a great up-tempo shoe that I've really enjoyed. So I feel like this is what I was hoping for out of the SC Trainer. It's not as firm. There's definitely more balance, but it has training capacities. I don't know if you ever had the experience, like there's super shoes you're like, I can't do a normal run in this. It's not comfortable. Right. This is not one of those where it's like you can do longer race efforts. You can do a training run. It can handle that stuff. And I guess that's how it's designed. Just that upper, you're right. It is very close. It's racing style upper and a more versatile midsole design, but it is also very stiff. That first transition took me. It's a very locked in forefoot rocker. Yeah, it is. You're not going to break that in. It is what it is. And for me, luckily, it does work. It's just a little stiff.
What I find so interesting is that I feel like I'm spilling over in this shoe, and I'm typically a pretty flatline 9. Like I don't really have to transition between 9.5 and 9 or whatever. Whereas you in other brands are going up and down. So it just shows that there's so much more complexity in terms of what fit, like why something fits and something doesn't. So it's real. People always are like, well, is it true to size or is it half size up? And it's like, well, for me, this is a half size up shoe for sure. For others, it's a true to size, which is really bizarre. It's hard to nail down. And
it's not just length. And that's what's something that we were talking about really made me realize it's not just the length of the shoe. It's a lot of other components of how it tapers, all this other stuff, the volume.
Volume for me is the problem. And the taper.
We may need to say something different than true to size, just because I feel like that doesn't do justice. Yeah, we have to think about this, about how to describe this, and I've seen this and people are going to go, you need to do volumetric measurements. Yeah, I've seen the same thing where somebody says, yeah, the volume of this is similar to another shoe. And I'm like, the fit difference between those shoes is night and day.
Because you can have volume dispersed differently. It could be bulbous, like right by the transition to the MTPs. It could, but still taper like crazy. So it's hard. You can't.
We got to work on this.
It's hard to do because there's too many variables that we can't measure.
Right.
We can't measure them because it's a combination of the matching between what my foot is and what the shoe is. But
perception
I'm
as well
to get
more. Yeah.
Do you have other stuff?
I do, actually. So I also have the SC Elite version 6, which I was super pumped about. This thing got way more aggressive, so much lighter, still maintains the 8mm drop, way softer than the previous version, not quite as stable, though there's still some components that have worked okay. But I really feel like these are two different racing shoes where if you want a little bit more and you're like me, for example, like I'm not going to probably be able to take the SC Elite version 6 for a marathon, but most of us are going to be able to handle the SC Rebel for that kind of effort. But if you're that like light, super efficient elite runner that likes less shoe, you could totally do this. Same thing. It is a little bit it's a lot lighter. I have struggled a little bit getting this to go really, really fast, but those longer, steady efforts, the tempo efforts, also really good in this shoe. Much lighter. It feels like a racing flat, which is nice. Not all the super shoes feel like that, but just feels kind of lower, even though it's a 40-32 stack height. It just feels like less shoe, and it feels fast. I'm just still trying to figure out how to get it to turn over really, really quick, but definitely that distance racer, softer, not as stable as the previous versions. If you want a little bit softer compared to the prior one and a lot lighter, New Balance is starting to get more aggressive. That's all I can say. It's kind of a big takeaway. But ironically, this is the wider fitting of the two ones. Like I feel like I had plenty of room in the forefoot and going, wow, I've gotten wiggle room. And then the SC Rebel's like, I don't got wiggle room.
Yeah. So I've put it on, but haven't ran in it yet. Yeah. And it's so very different than version 5, you'd say?
Oh, yeah. Oh, completely a different shoe.
Yeah.
I would say that the SC Rebel is more of an evolution of the SC Elite 5. The SC Elite version 6 is like almost a completely different shoe. Yeah. In my opinion. Not in a bad way, but very different.
Yeah.
I do have two other ones really quick. One that I just keep getting miles on, and I really want to double down on some of the stuff that I've said previously. Mm-hmm. I still have the Topo Spectre Elite. It's getting better. I'm loving this shoe. Did another up-tempo long run in it. It did great. I'm still sticking by the stable neutral comments in the midfoot and the forefoot, less so in the heel. This left shoe, we're over 50 miles, almost 60 miles. This thing is hanging on. This is great. The bounce is great. The ATPU foam, like when I'm warming up in it, I'm like, okay. But once I get rolling and get moving, it's got some good bounce. And I would not have expected that from Topo, but I'm standing by. This is one of the top super racers of the year, especially not necessarily the fastest of all of them, but one of the more comfortable ones. And definitely if you want that anatomic toe box, it is by far the best if you want that. And that feels awesome. You're 12 miles deep in a run and hitting 620s and pushing a stroller. That toe box feels great to not have your toes get crushed. So they're great. And then the last one, not take up too much time, I am really enjoying the Topo Aura 2. Mm-hmm. The better forefoot rocker compared to the last one. It wasn't quite as significant. It just felt really flat. This just rolls a lot better. It's not a sexy shoe. It's a mild stability shoe. It's not going to be the fastest thing. Use kind of more traditional foam, but man, just that small change in the rocker really makes it transition a lot better. I don't have a lot of trainers. Ironically, most of the stuff I got is like lightweight trainer racing shoes. So been defaulting to that for a lot of easy runs. Yeah. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. All right. Well, that's what we have in for testing. As always, this segment is fueled by Skratch Labs. If you want to check out any of Skratch Labs in-run nutrition, hydration stuff, you can go to skratchlabs.com and check out what they are up to. If you want, you can use the code Doctors of Running to get 20% off your first order.
And this will probably be too late by then, but they were having like a flavor face-off, like which one they can keep, the watermelon versus the cucumber lime.
Yeah, what did you choose, Matt?
I didn't choose. I didn't have an answer.
Because you loved both of them.
I really like both of them. I think they should just keep both, honestly. Use the cucumber lime on the run this morning. It was great.
They need something for you to complain about, though. So they got to choose ones that you can complain about whatever one they didn't keep. They got to just have always something for you to do. What?
Just give you like a lettuce flavored one that gives you diarrhea, like whatever is going on right now. No, I'm sorry. That's awful.
All right.
I hope BJ cuts that.
Yeah, BJ.
No, I don't really have. I don't really have anything to complain about. The flavors have been fantastic. I still haven't tried the mango. What's that called? The super
high carb.
Yeah, I haven't tried that yet.
I have. I've been using it my last because I'm up to like hour and a half runs.
Nice.
So I've been using that. Honestly, it's their best. It's their best tasting super high carb. Because some of the other, the only thing about super high carb is it doesn't dissolve fast enough for me. It usually takes 1 to 2 miles, or like shaking it in an Nalgene first.
Yeah.
But
what I think you're supposed to do actually, but I don't do it either. So
that's just one extra step, one extra dirty dish. But the flavor of that one is the best of all the other ones for me.
Check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty mild and just simple.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. We now are going to be talking about questions from you all in our mailbag. Whenever we do this, people sometimes ask personal questions, and we always just want to make sure that you all know we're not giving medical advice for these things. We're just talking about it from our perspective as doctors of physical therapy, and do with the information what you will, but it's not meant to be medical advice, just for educational purposes. So our first question is from Polly, and Polly asks, do shoes age when stored without being worn? If I stock up on shoes I love now, will they degrade noticeably if I start running them in 5 to 10 years? She gave a little background. They've been running very little over the last 7 years, so haven't been buying new running shoes. She knows that the foams and stuff have changed significantly, but she's kind of curious about that timeline of if they degrade on their own. Also kind of just wondering what to potentially purchase. What are quote, all around safe shoes for a mix of terrains and paces? So let's start with the first question though.
Got it. I'm going to tell a little story. When I was working in running stores, I got the opportunity to grab a pair of Nike Mayflies. And I was like, oh, these are super cool. It was in the original like Kenya colorway. And the manager on staff was like, yeah, you can totally just go run on those. And they fell apart. The midsole just totally disintegrated as I went to go run. I was mortified, and they laughed at me. It was a great example of the fact that midsoles do break down. And you will see that person, the runner that's had the same pair of shoes for 20-something years, there is a rare possibility that something like that can happen with the midsole getting compressed enough over time. That doesn't necessarily make it better. It's just been compacted. But you leave those things, you're not using them, they definitely lose their ability to shock absorb, which is kind of, unless you have like a minimal shoe that has, no midsole, it's just the outsole, those midsoles are going to break down, especially just sitting there. The temperature fluctuations, all kinds of stuff, they do not last forever. So if you suddenly take those out, you don't have the same promise that they're going to maintain the same qualities that it once had. Those will change. So I usually tell people, hey, you can get a shoe on sale that's like 2 or maybe 3 years old. I wouldn't go beyond that, because even that thing sitting in some warehouse that's stuffy and the temperatures have gone crazy, that will also impact and break things down quicker. So you got to shoot for seven years. I know times are really tough financially, but if you can swing it, it'd be great to get last year's model on sale, because yes, things break down. And certainly as things are getting lighter, they seem to be breaking down quicker. And that's hypothesis. I don't have any evidence to break that down, just testimonial, but absolutely they break down.
Yeah. I don't have really anything to add there, but I'm curious your thoughts on her next part of like, what is an all-around safe shoe? One that could do lots of paces, lots of terrains, kind of like bringing to the new age of running, but not going too extreme. So staying safe, but getting a do-it-all shoe. What are your initial thoughts on that?
My brain's not working, so I'm going to defer to you until I can get some oxygen back there to think for a sec. I mean, like, yeah, it's the stuff we've talked about doesn't really do that. Like, there a lot of the shoes we brought up today are super shoes that are like really only for road and for faster paces. I'm trying to think. Do you have any options while I think?
Yeah, I mean, my brain goes to a lot of the actual classic daily trainers right now. So we had an episode that we recorded, I think it was just last week, where we ranked daily training shoes. Honestly, pretty much any of them from that episode would probably give you the new age foam feel, even though like if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably tried all the super duper fancy foams. But in comparison to 7 years ago, everything that we have on that list is going to feel like so bouncy and like something they've never felt before. So, you look at Mizuno's Wave Rider, you could look at the Ultra, you could look at one we didn't have on the list, but the Ultra Forward, Flow 3, or you could look at the Forward Via 2. Those have a wide enough platform. They have a nice rubber outsole. They could handle some trail, some road, some gravel. They could go a little bit faster, a little bit slower. Those are the ones, Nova Blast could be in there too. Pretty much anything, because a lot of these shoes are having a little bit more foam. And like the Nova Blast, we were just talking about how wide the platform is, but really wide heel, really wide forefoot. So that's where my brain goes first for poly. But I don't know if you have any others that came into your... I don't think any of these like super rockers, super foam, ATPU, no. That's not where my mind goes. It goes to...
Absolutely not.
The more daily training stuff.
I went to more daily trainers. The Pegasus, even though we haven't gotten to try 42, is just the Pegasus has been a classic shoe for that, where like it's not the fastest thing, but it can do it. It's got a lug outsole, which really helps. There's also the Pegasus Trail, but that's not quite as good on the road. So yeah, I think a lot of the daily trainers that have a little bit more outsole is a great place to start. You don't need things, don't get a super trainer, don't get stuff like that. Just get something that you can be more consistent in. And I think the standard daily trainers are a great place to start.
Absolutely. Well, our next question is from Will. And Will is wondering if we can go a little bit more in depth about the difference between forefoot rockers and toe springs, including their biomechanical effect. Talked about how Matt briefly started talking about how this exists in the Topo Spectre Elite video that he did. So you can find that on YouTube, but would love to learn more about the difference between the two. I think what I have a visual here that may or may not be helpful, but I'm going to show it to people so that they can kind of see what it can look like. So I'll explain it for those who are just listening, but if you go on YouTube, you should be able to see it. So what I have drawn here are basically 3 different midsoles. From on the top, you can see that the top part of the drawing is where your foot would sit. It's the platform. And that would be completely flat. And then underneath, there's kind of a curve. That curve is the midsole. This top one would be considered just a forefoot rocker. So the platform that the foot on is flat, but the foam rockers up. This second one here is what's showing more of just toe spring and not so much a rocker, even though I know I curved it a little bit. The toe spring, you can see now the platform where your foot is, the platform itself curves up. So that would bring your toes into extension or bringing your toes up. A lot of shoes that have toe spring combine it with a rocker. And so what you can see on this last one is the platform curves up, and there's also the curve within the midsole material. So just from a definitions standpoint, that's the difference, where you have a toe spring is where your foot is on the platform and it curves up, so your toes get curved up, whereas a rocker, the platform can be flat and it's just the foam that is curved. So do you want to go into some biomechanical differences here?
Yeah, so rockers this originally comes from the foot and ankle. So the rockers of the foot, there's 3 of them. There's the heel rocker or the bevel of the calcaneus, that when you land, and these rockers naturally help with making human gait or human locomotion more efficient, right? Rather than have to use this much like muscular force or effort, you are able to roll through things and it saves energy and improves economy. So the heel rocker is the curved calcaneus. That's why we constantly talk about heel bevels going, this is more efficient, helps roll and helps the transition smooth out. The overall rocker or the ankle rocker is normally where the talocrural, the ankle joint sits, where the tibia kind of moves over the foot and your plantar flexor muscles control that. So that's the second part, is the body mass moves over that rather than having to use extra energy. The last rocker is called the forefoot rocker in the foot, and that's your body's ability for your toes to extend so your body mass can transition over that and not have to push off nearly as much. Now, when you start getting some of these shoes that have really thick midsoles, the further away from you are from the ground, the harder it is for your natural rockers of your foot and ankle to work, and you have to replace those. So a forefoot rocker is where, as Nathan was talking about, that curve in the front of the foot, the front of the shoe, that when you hit the front of the shoe, it allows you to roll forward because the midsole is so thick, oftentimes your toes can't move. So it has to be able to create that artificial rocking forward effect. And normally, biomechanically, if this lines up with you, obviously if it doesn't, it can make the shoe feel too stiff, or there's some other things that can happen. But normally what this does is a rocker shoe, especially a forefoot rocker, actually reduces the stress on your plantar flexor muscles, like the muscles that help push you forward, because it's naturally rolling you forward, which
your calf muscles.
It reduces the workload from your calf muscles, which is great because, for longer distances, that's typically the muscles that contribute to propulsion most during running compared to anything else. If you reduce their workload, theoretically, it makes people more efficient. So it can reduce stress there. It can reduce stress on the Achilles tendon because there's not as much stretch going through there. So people with Achilles tendinopathy, plantar fasciitis, stuff like that reduces stress in that area. What you need to be aware of is you can't eliminate things. They go somewhere else. So we know from the evidence that when you have a forefoot rocker that lines up with you on an overall rocker, it shifts some of the workload up to the knee and the hip. So people that typically use more of a hip or knee movement strategy often benefit from this because they may be able to utilize, they may feel like they get more out of the shoe. So again, the forefoot rocker rolls you forward. And that's great if your toes are kept in a neutral position, right? So because then you're not having to be in an artificial position. Toe spring actively extends your toes and doesn't allow them to move. During normal gait, your toes stay in a neutral position and then move into extension as you transition as part of the forefoot rocker. When those are held in extension, the mechanism doesn't quite do its job. It's actually held at end range. And when you extend the toes, part of the things that helps kind of things efficiently snap forward is it actually tightens up the plantar fascia. There's something called the windlass mechanism that tightens up the foot so that as you transition that phase of gait, it actually stiffens the foot up so you have a stable platform to push off from. That's great. And for people that have maybe a little bit of extra mobility, it can actually lock up the foot, so it creates maybe a little bit more structure. The problem is you're being held in that position constantly. The tissues like plantar fascia have constant stretch on them. So there are certain people that will know, hey, if I run in a shoe that has a lot of toe spring, I sometimes get some plantar fascia symptoms, or my foot kind of feels a little bit stiff, or maybe I'm not shock absorbing as well, which is why we often encourage companies to go, hey, don't use this as much. And we get pushback going, oh, it's more efficient, whatever. Yeah, you've locked your foot up, so it will be more efficient to roll through. You just have to think from the other side of you are also keeping constant tension on certain tissues that function best when then they get to be in a variety of stimuli, not just constantly being yanked on. They want to be short, long, everything in between. Things do better when they move rather than they're kind of locked into place. That said, some people do very well with toe spring because it actually locks their foot up and creates a little more stability. So it's not like it's bad. It's just one of those things going, hey, this is a component to a shoe. This works great for some people. It may not work well for others.
Right. I think the only other thing that I would add is thinking about one of the things that our foot needs to do, most of us need to do, is to pronate. So pronation is a really important part of how we absorb shock. When your foot is, or when your toes are held in extension, as Matt said, it stiffens up the foot. And what happens is when your foot goes into pronation, it becomes more flexible. And that's so that you can adapt, shock absorb, and then you are supposed to become stiff afterwards. And so I think that's a potential problem and another factor that contributes to some of the potential risk of toe spring for developing like plantar fascia pain, because it's not only held under tension, but your foot isn't allowed to accommodate to the surface as much. It could be so minor that it doesn't matter. It's not like this equals bad, toe spring equals bad, but there are more considerations. Is there anything else you want to say about this in particular with that shoe, Matt, with the Spectre Elite?
Yeah, I feel like this is done subtly enough that it hasn't bothered me that much. The other challenge with toe spring when it gets really aggressive is that sometimes if it's not hitting at the right angle, it basically makes the shoe feel shorter because your toes are kind of hitting the end. If you don't have toe extension, this is not going to be a shoe that's going to work for you. And a lot of people will compensate by actually flexing their toes to functionally shorten the shoe. So that's also, you don't want to be in a constantly flex position either. But I will say in the Spectre Elite, although I felt it initially, the midsole foam is breaking in enough that I haven't really felt it, since probably around 30 miles, that kind of sensation went away. So some shoes will break in. The challenge is your body going to be able to tolerate it that long? And the answer for me with the Spectre Elite was absolutely. It was fine. Cool. But,
nice.
To each everybody's going to be a little different.
Yeah. All right, our next question is from Jeff. Jeff writes this: I'm wondering if it's helpful from a foot and leg strength perspective to include a flexible, non-rockered shoe in a shoe rotation. Stiffer rockered shoes work great for me. They list the Nova Blast 5 and Magic Speed 4 as working for them. But I'm wondering if a more flexible, less rockered shoe would add a measure of valuable stress to my running. My initial thought here, and it's maybe a little bit of semantics, but running will not build strength. So like running won't build leg strength. To build strength, you actually need to lift pretty heavy. But I think what he's more saying, are there important adaptations that would happen by having a flexible shoe? So can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, I think it can be helpful. There is some evidence that having a rotation of some different shoes may be helpful because you're exposing your body potentially to a couple different stimuli rather than the exact same thing over and over. Bodies like to experience some different things, right? So that if you just do the same thing over and over again, you're consistent, but then as soon as you expose something different, you may not be ready for that. So having a variety of things is good. That said, if you expose yourself to something really new, that also is an injury risk, right? Too quick, because you have to make sure your body adapts to it. So I'd say, I think that's actually a good idea. If it fits within your training and you are able to tolerate and transition in slow enough because your body needs time to adapt, if that's something you're willing to do, I think that's a great idea, having a variety of things. I just want to caution people away, and there's a lot of Instagram, YouTube stuff where there's a lot of hype and people jump ahead. We don't actually have evidence that different shoes make you weaker. Clinically, we can have some thought that go, these are going to load different things, and maybe different shoes, like we know minimal shoes that like walking, running, you get some muscle hypertrophy in your foot and ankle, but hypertrophy isn't the same thing as strength. That's muscle size. We're actually awful at trying to measure strength, and there's a couple interesting devices, but we got to get better at measuring some of like what does intrinsic foot strength. People throw that term around, but we are not accurate at actually measuring that. So we can't actually say this shoe makes your foot weak. All we can say is this shoe or this shoe type will expose your body to these different things. And it might not be a bad idea to expose your body to a couple different things, assuming you take it slow enough and you're still smart with your training. So I think that if you can handle that and you take time, not a bad idea to, because a stiff rockered shoe, you're not going to get as much, toe extension compared to something that has a little more flexibility. That's not good or bad. If your body can handle that, cool, might be good to maintain that. If you can't handle that and you have different pathologies or different, genetic makeup that's just not something you have, I wouldn't do it. But if you want to maintain it, great. Thoughts?
Are there any shoes that come to mind that if somebody was thinking about adding something that was more flexible, a little bit lower, are there any shoes that pop into mind right away?
Can I reach it without disconnecting?
Not worth it.
Topo. I can see it and I can't see the name.
Is it a zero drop shoe or no?
Yeah, it's the Topo.
There's Magnafly, or there's the Phantom.
Phantom is a great option. Flylight is also, did I say that right?
Flylight. Yeah, that's even lower. That's
even lower.
Yeah.
Probably the Phantom is if you can handle zero drop. And ironically, that shoe, is it zero drop? It is, right?
So Phantom's 5.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
The Magnafly is 0.
Yeah.
And that's like moderate stack.
Yeah.
And then the lower stack is the Flylight.
Yeah. The Phantom has been great for me on that, where it's like, I just want something that moves a little bit more. I think that's a fantastic. There's not a lot of low stack shoes out there. That is one of them that I have really enjoyed. What about you?
Yeah, the only one that immediately popped into my mind as well was the Ultra Experience Flow. That has 4mm drop. It's got moderate stack. It's flexible. It's definitely flexible in the forefoot. So that one popped into my mind as well. I think even, it's not super low stack, but the 1080 is really flexible. So
it's very flexible.
It's going to give you varied stimuli because the 1080 flexes well from in the forefoot. Like it really can bend. So you're going to use the rockers of your foot for that one for sure.
Which is kind of a weird sensation. What was that Sketcher shoe? It was the Max Road? Do you remember that shoe?
Oh yeah, the pod one.
Yeah, it was
very podular.
Super soft, podular, insane flexibility for being a super high stack shoe. And I was like, this is really interesting. Yeah.
It never worked for me super well because the heel bevel was very extreme. So if you landed backwards, it was like a little bit of a speed bump. So I didn't get along as well. I think that was one of Bach's favorite shoes ever.
It is one of Bach's favorite shoes. Yeah.
Bring it back for Bach.
It is. Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
But just some examples of that.
Our next question is, none more from me. I think that's good.
Got it. Great.
Our next question is from Samantha, and they have questions about stability shoes and arches, meaning the arches of our foot. So
yes,
the questions are this. First, does everyone with low arches need stability shoes? Can stability shoes adversely impact some runners with low arches? Second question, can big toe stiffness cause arch pain, even if the toe can move and just feels tight? If so, could footwear considerations similar to those for hallux rigidus apply here? Or would they need something different? So do you want to take the first one, the flat foot
those
matching?
Are beautiful. Yeah. These are beautiful questions. We have very good evidence, thanks to the U.S. military, who ran some massive studies on this, that trying to match shoes based on arch height is complete garbage. And this isn't just some small study where they're like, we only had, this is like thousands of people and thousands and thousands of recruits and military individuals that they did, where it was like, the data is really good that you should not use arch height to try to match like neutral stability, because arch height is a static measurement. And I know the foot scanners do this all the time. That's not how that works. Because you can look at something statically, but you don't really know what happens until it moves. And you can have somebody that has a low arch that has a very stiff arch. You can have somebody with a very high arch that's actually really flexible and they can't control it very well. So you can have everything under the sun. There's a lot of people, and one of the reasons Bach and I will often talk about arch height or talk about stable neutral shoes. A great example of this is a shoe like the Brooks Ghost Max. It has a very low arch, so people like myself, or the Saucony Echelon is another great shoe that has very little arch, but it's wider and it's really stable without having aggressive arch support, because you can have a foot that's a very low arch and you're really sensitive to any high arch height or arch support, but you still want something a little wider and stable and lower. It's a great example of, hey, just because your arch is a certain height doesn't mean you need a certain stability level. Yeah. If you hear that, I am sorry to say this, that is not evidence-based way to prescribe shoes.
Yep.
And same thing, just because you have a high arch, sorry, Nathan, just because you have a high arch doesn't mean, you need a neutral shoe, because there's working in running stores, when I was taught this, like high arch, you need neutral shoe. And then you get not the stereotype, the classic middle-aged woman who come in going, I have the stiff, really high arch, but I want the super aggressive Kayano. And it's like, wait, what? You want the super aggressive, immediately posted shoe, and you have the most rigid arch I've ever seen. How does this work? And it was comfort.
It worked.
Right? Yeah. They didn't pronate. It just worked. It's the comfort filter. And so, sorry to interrupt you, but yeah.
No, you did not interrupt me. I was going to interrupt you. I think the only other thing I'm going to add is not only do we know that matching foot type to shoe based on static measurements doesn't matter. The other thing is that someone's ability to understand your foot posture statically and dynamically, we're also very bad at that.
Yeah.
So you can't really trust any of the stuff that you have tested. Like if you're having a nice scan in a store, great, that's static. That means nothing. If they're watching you walk, I'm sorry, that also probably means nothing, unless they're extremely highly trained and they have technology that can maybe help watch you with your walking. But even then, the ability to match that to shoes is not shown yet. So follow the comfort filter.
Yeah. There are some There are some things like, hey, if you have a history of X injury, that sometimes a shoe with arch support can be helpful. Like if you have posterior tibialis problems or medial arch stuff, like then an injury, then an arch support may be helpful, but comfort, your perception of comfort tends to be more predictive, as Nathan just said.
Yeah. So the second part of the question I think is a good one too. So they're asking about, just I'll repeat it. They said, can big toe stiffness cause arch pain even if the toe can move? It just feels tight. And I would kind of want to say a few things about that. I think the first thing that comes into my mind, if someone in this situation walked into the clinic with me, I would be testing for what's called pseudo hallux rigidus. And so hallux rigidus is when you cannot actually extend the big toe. Pseudo hallux rigidus is when a muscle and tendon complex called the flexor hallucis longus, which comes down the back of your calf and then goes all the way to the end of your big toe. If there's a length deficit in that muscle, that can cause that tightness feeling, and actually could be part of your arch pain because that tendon passes all the way through the arch of your foot. And so if you have a tendinopathy of that muscle, you can definitely get arch pain. And the way that somebody can test for that a little bit, it's hard to test on your own. But if you move your ankle into dorsiflexion, bringing your foot up, and if you notice in that position that you can't extend your toe, but then when you point your toe, then you can extend your big toe. So sorry, I've said that word. If you dorsiflex your foot or your ankle, bringing your ankle up, then you cannot extend your big toe. But if you plantar flex your ankle, or like pointing your ankle, and then you can extend your toe, big toe, that would be what's considered pseudo hallux rigidus, where when you go into a position that really tenses that tendon and muscle complex, that's when it doesn't move. That would be where I would go down in this clinical pictures to figure out, is there a length deficit of their flexor hallucis longus? Do they have a tendinopathy of that muscle? Because that would be a potential connector all the way through the arch down to the big toe. So that's not exactly answering the question, but it does make me think, with a person in this situation, I would go more towards clinical diagnosis and rehab and like exercise loading type stuff, maybe more than starting with footwear. Whereas if I knew someone had hallux rigidus, footwear is going to be a huge part of their plan. Yep. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, clinically, I will say the other thing that's in that area that could contribute but isn't as common in my clinical experience is there is also the flexor hallucis brevis and the adductor hallucis that's right there. But it's been my experience that it's, especially runners, like it's way more common, and it's a flexor tendinopathy, flexor hallucis longus tendinopathy in that area. And cool, you can definitely offload it with a forefoot rocker. Like, yeah, you may get some symptom relief, but unless you adequately load and help remodel that tendon, that's not going to go away. And you don't have to have, we've had Karen Cybernagel on here, and it's a great episode you should listen to about like what really happens with tendons. You got to take care of those, like load them, treat them, because pain doesn't necessarily tell you if the thing's healed or not. And so I would say 100% with Nathan, you can use a shoe, but I would encourage you to go, hey, make sure you're actually getting some like a little bit of rehab there just to like flush everything out and move forwards.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to try to do next is we're going to try to do a shoe question lightning round. So some of these questions might be a bit longer, but the goal is that we kind of give quick answers with different shoes that may work. So we kind of got to be on our toes, and we'll see if it works out. You ready, Matt?
I don't know.
All right. So this first shoe question is actually from two people, from Ian and Amy. And they're basically asking, is there a shoe similar to the 860 from New Balance version 14 in terms of wedge style stability that has similar weight and drop? And they're wanting something that maybe is a little bit more fun and snappy. So Matt, what do you got? I don't have an answer for this one because I'm not running the stability shoes.
Yeah, unfortunately,
they want that maximal kind of stability.
I don't think they want that much, because version 15 is actually a little bit, has a livelier feel. It is much heavier than version 14, but it is way more maximal. The foam, they say, what is it? Fresh Foam X, but it doesn't feel at all like it. Like I felt like version 14 was not as snappy, but it had that really wonderful wedge. And for those wondering, wedge versus like post, medial post is just a harder what?
I'm laughing because this is our lightning round, and it's going great. It's going great so far. But people want to hear this.
I know.
Go for it.
Medial post, harder material on the inside or outside theoretically that slows motion. The wedge is it holds your foot at an angle, okay? And just people respond differently to different things. Version 15 is okay. It has some of, not the same amount of wedging. I would say the wedging occurs more in the midfoot and the forefoot, less in the heel like the last version. And for something that's a little bit more fun, I actually have an answer because I was just stalling to actually use my brain. But the Hurricane 26 is actually probably what's going to fit best because it's got an ATPU top sole. It's got that wedge design where you kind of feel like you're kind of out on the outside. So if you're looking for something, and it's way later than both the 860s or any 860, I think. Saucony Hurricane 26, livelier ride, has that wedge feeling, and definitely a quicker, more fun underfoot feel. Great. So thanks for letting me procrastinate so I could think.
This next question is from Mary. We'll try lightning round version 2. Here we go. Looking at advice for a super shoe, they've run 2 marathons in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 and loved it. Training the Azuras and for right now, and they're also loving that. Running Berlin in September, wanting to know which shoe they should race in. They do have some stability needs. Mm-hmm. Which super shoe should they use?
Oh, man. Saucony's not going to like this because it's what they try to design it for, but version 5 is out. Both Andrew and I did not find the Endorphin Pro 5 to be nearly as stable. There's not a lot of stability stuff out there. I mean, there's the 361 Flame 5, which is fairly stable. It's a little firmer, really hard heel counter. It's not version 4. It's a little bit more performance trainer, but it can still move. It's just it's a lot firmer. If you can handle the lower drop and your wider toe box, I'm really loving the Spectre Elite, and I've mentioned this a few times. That's the one that you may be able to handle. The other option, if you can make this upper work, is and I mentioned earlier on Cloud Boom. Not Cloud Boom. I keep calling it the Cloud Monster Hyper 3 LS is lighter than the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4 and 5. It doesn't have a plate, but it's still pretty stiff. Tons of stack height, but it's very light and responds like a medially posted shoe. That medial arch is so high that it may work. It's not cheap, but it's something that you may want to consider, but we don't really have a lot of options. The only other stable racer is the Hoka Rocket X3, but it fits very snug. The heel counter is pretty stiff, and I prefer it for shorter distances, although literally every other reviewer has been like, this is soft, it's a great marathon shoe. And I'm like, am I the only one that's having the opposite experience? But there's a couple options there that if you need just a teeny bit of stability, but yeah, I'm kind of sad. The Endorphin Pro 4 was a pretty great shoe, and Endorphin Pro 5 kind of went to that what they describe as like trainer racer kind of thing. Nathan, do you have anyone?
The one that came into my mind was the Endorphin Elite 1, late stage rocker like the Azura.
Yeah,
and it's stable, but that doesn't exist. If this was if the Cloud Boom Strike was probably wider in the midfoot, that would probably work too from a rocker profile standpoint.
Actually, yes, that's a very similar profile to the Pro 4 and the Endorphin Elite 1. It's just that the midfoot and heel is not going to be quite as stable.
Right.
So,
all right, we got our next question here.
So much for lightning.
I know. All right. This is a person, they say, I'm 43, around 200 pounds, on my feet all day in a retail environment, have been wanting to get back into running outdoors again after 20 years, have an arch that seems to flatten out, underweight, and nearly every shoe I try feels like there isn't a base underneath my interior side of my foot, especially the midfoot. Currently, the best I can find is the Saucony Echelon 10 in a 12.5 4E. Many wider shoes aren't really wider. I would love Ultras, but the toe box comes in too narrow for them. So what shoes would you recommend? Man,
hit this individual and
the fact that they said Echelon was like Echelon.
Yeah, that's great. The Brooks Ghost Max comes in. The newest version is pretty narrow. I know it comes in a wide, but that was another thought off the top of my head just because the Echelon was mentioned. Interesting about was the anterior side feeling like it bottoms out?
No, the medial, their arch. It's like their arches. Yeah,
got it.
So they're wanting not to basically float over the edge of an upper.
So they're going to need something with a wider base and probably something that actually has arch support,
wider platform.
There. Yeah, wider platform.
My brain goes to Topo. Like if they haven't tried Topo, I could see if the 4-foot volume or platform in the Ultra and they like that, but it's a little bit too narrow. Topo's wider.
Yeah,
I'd try Phantom out as a entry level shoe there.
Yeah.
But what were you gonna say?
I mean, there's a couple, and this was for running or for the standing. You cut out for a second.
For running.
If the 860 V15 wide, really significant arch and a wedge there, and there's also like a light plate in this as well, so it's definitely a heavy duty shoe for sure. If you want something softer, the Saucony, wow, this is one of my favorite shoes. Why am I blanking on the name? Not the Hurricane, the what's the other one?
Not the Echelon?
No, not the Guide. Not why am I it's the shoe that we didn't know was going to survive and was like came out of nowhere. Why am I forgetting this? I have 100 miles on it.
Not the is it Omni?
Yes, the Omni is also a great option just because it's softer, so realize that, but that makes that medial post way more significant. So if you want that medial arch feeling great, the other thing that I was thinking about is although I hope they're still making this, the Asics GT4000 is also a really great option. I would not go with the Kayano just because it's not, you're not going to get that feeling you're looking for. But the Asics GT4000 is going to really have that very significant amount of medial arch support. If that's something you want, that is also a fantastic shoe. Wide, it's got arch support that actually is almost full length on the medial side and actually transitions a little bit in the lateral to keep you from excessively going either direction. As another really good option.
Awesome. Well, I think people can grade us on how well we did our quote unquote lightning round. I think that we did at least a C-, but I think that's generous. But hopefully you got something out of us talking through some different shoes. But thank you all for joining us for this episode. We always have fun getting to sift through your questions. If you have other questions, you can always send them to our email, doctorsofrunning@gmail.com, and hopefully we'll be able to touch them on a podcast episode. Matt, what you got? You got one more thing?
The most important question for the listeners, and especially comment this. If this episode was a pizza, what would it be? Actually, maybe don't answer that.
I'm so glad we did this. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.